On March 30th, 2026, at Arlington National Cemetery, the United States Air Force laid to rest Colonel Clarence Bud Anderson, a AAA test pilot, combat veteran of 3 wars, and by any honest measure, one of the finest fighter pilots this country has ever produced. He was 102 years old. 2 flyovers passed over Section 38 that afternoon. The first was a 4-ship of F-35s, and the second a 4-ship of P-51s, 2 of which bore the name Old Crow. If you know who Bud Anderson was, then you understand exactly why this mattered. If you don't, stick around because this one will be worth your time. I was fortunate to meet him 3 times, hear stories, and discuss a little bit about flying. I'll share that at the end. But first, I want to talk about Colonel Anderson and his life. Clarence Anderson Jr. was born January 13th, 1922 in Oakland, California. Friday the 13th. He would spend a lifetime proving that meant absolutely nothing. He grew up on a fruit farm near Newcastle, a town of about 1,000 people in the Placer County foothills, just northeast of Sacramento. Apples, cherries, peaches, pears. The family was hit hard by depression. His father lost almost everything, but Bud never really knew that. There was always food on the table. He played football and basketball, a normal small-town California kid. And then 2 things happened that changed the direction of his life. When Bud was 5 years old, Charles Lindbergh crossed the Atlantic. He later said it kindled a lifelong interest he couldn't fully explain. 3 years later, May 11th, 1929, his father took him to a small dirt airfield on Auburn Boulevard near Sacramento. A pilot was giving rides in a Stearman biplane, open cockpits. Father and son in the front, pilot in the back. They flew over the family farm. The plane rolled up on the side. 7-year-old Bud Anderson looked straight down at his shoes, too afraid to look out. His mother saved the certificate for 50 years. 6 months after that ride, a Boeing trimotor crashed on a ranch less than 3 miles from their home. All 4 on board survived. The next morning, Bud and his friend Jack ran to the wreckage. They examined the cockpit, touched everything, took pieces home as treasure. He'd later write, after that, all we talked and dreamed of were airplanes and airplanes. January 1942, a month after Pearl Harbor, Bud Anderson enlisted in the Army Aviation Cadet Program. He earned his wings and commissioned in September 1942. He was 20 years old. He was assigned to the 363rd Fighter Squadron, 357th Fighter Group, the 8th Air Force based at Liston, England. The Oxford boys. Their P-51 Mustangs wore the distinctive yellow and red checkered noses. And his aircraft, every one of them, was named Old Crow after his favorite whiskey. Between March and December of 1944, Bud Anderson flew 116 combat missions over occupied Europe. He finished with 16 and a quarter confirmed aerial victories, AAA status, the 3rd highest scorer in the 357th Fighter Group. Never once hit by enemy fire, never once forced to abort for a mechanical or battle damage. I mean, never aborting for a mechanical issue is quite impressive in and of itself. 116 missions in one of the most contested airspaces in historic warfare, and he brought every one of those aircraft home. The only damage Old Crow ever sustained, a single small arms round during a strafing run after D-Day, a hole the size of his little finger that didn't even go all the way through. He patched it with a British shilling. His first kill came on March 8, 1944, an escort mission from Berlin. He was turning circles with a Bf-109 and couldn't get a clean shot. He tried something he later called bizarre. Pulled his gun sight through the enemy aircraft and fired blind, hoping the German would fly through the stream. Used less than 50 rounds, less than 1 second of trigger time, and he hit the coolant system. His wingman told him afterward, best shooting I've ever seen in my life. Anderson's own assessment, got a goddamn golden BB on him. On May 27, 1944, he had what he called the fight of his life. He was engaged with 4 Bf-109s. One of the German pilots was exceptional. He wouldn't run. The 2 of them went vertical, full power, both aircraft hanging by their propellers at the edge of a stall. 35,000 feet over Europe. Anderson looked back over his shoulder and he saw the German pulling his nose up to fire. He could see the 20mm cannon barrel through the propeller hub. He later said it was, and I'm quoting directly, the single most frightening thing I've ever seen in my life, then and now. The Messerschmitt stalled first, the Mustang held. Anderson recovered, dove after him, and eventually watched the German aircraft fall away, trailing flame and smoke. So thick, he wrote, the Messerschmitt and its shadow on the ground rushed towards one another, and then finally, silently merged. He got 3 of the 4 that day. On his first kill, someone asked him years later if he thought about the pilot's family. His answer was direct. Did I wonder about the mother and children? No. Then and not now. World War II was a total thing. Up against them, when being against them was unquestionably the right thing to be. All my opponents were trying to kill me, and frankly, I was always elated they hadn't. A name that often comes up regularly when you talk about Colonel Anderson is General Yeager. They both flew together in the same squadron. Lived in the same hut. They burned their victory markings into the same wooden door with a hot poker. Yeager, Anderson, O'Brien, Browning, all names carved into the wood of wartime life. Yeager's assessment of Anderson as a pilot was simple. In the airplane, the guy was a mongoose, the best fighter pilot I ever saw. Coming from Chuck Yeager, that's not a small statement. Their last combat mission together was something of legends when it came to the 357th. Now, Anderson was the operations officer at the time, which meant he controlled who flew the schedule. The night before the mission, Yeager proposed a plan. Anderson put both of them down on the roster as spares. Spares would fly to altitude, and if no one aborted, they would turn around and go home. On that day, no one aborted. They were cleared to return to base. They went to Switzerland instead. They dropped their external fuel tanks over Mont Blanc, tried to set them on fire by strafing them on the way down, which Anderson described as seeming like a good idea at the time. They found a lake, buzzed a hotel at low level, flew home across France just above the treetops. Anderson's description of the arrangement: Chuck was the guide and I was the tourist. They were the last two aircraft back from the mission that day. When they landed, a small crowd had gathered. Anderson's crew chief jumped on the wing excited. The group had just scored its greatest aerial victory of the war, 56.5 kills, 3 losses. The crew chief said, "The group got more than 50 today. How many did you get?" Anderson, in what he described as a strangled voice, "None." He and Yeager had been sightseeing. And funny enough, the first time I met Colonel Anderson was at Sun and Fun in 2017, and he told this story to a small group of us, but he mentioned that there was a little bit more to it, that him and Chuck had a little discussion of saying, well, the chances that they both get their asses shot off today on their last mission might be high. So I think that factored into how they played this out. And when you know it, the group got the most kills of the entire war that day. And while the war did end, Colonel Anderson didn't stop flying. He went on to spend 25 years as a test pilot. He flew experimental programs like science fiction, coupling fighter jets to wingtips of B-29 bombers, trying to do the first aerial refueling. The F-84 Parasite fighter, launched from and recovered by a B-36 Peacemaker in flight. Ultimately flew more than 130 different types of aircraft and logged over 7,500 flying hours. He commanded an F-86 squadron in post-war Korea, commanded an F-105 wing in Okinawa, and then at age 48 flew 25 combat missions over Vietnam in the F-105 Thunder Chief. 3 wars, 3 different aircraft generations, same pilot. His decorations by the time he retired included 2 Legions of Merit, 5 Distinguished Flying Crosses, a Bronze Star, 16 Air Medals, and France's Legion of Honor. He retired from the Air Force in March of 1972, and after 30 consecutive years of active duty, he went straight to work for McDonnell Aircraft, managed their flight test facility at Edwards for 12 years. He flew all the way up to age 90 until he voluntarily stopped. Not because he had to, but because he decided it was time. Away from the cockpit, he was a husband, a father, a grandfather. He and his wife, Eleanor, were married for nearly 70 years. When she moved to the nursing home in her final years, he visited her every single day, always brought something to her to cheer her up. In 2008, he was inducted to the National Aviation Hall of Fame. In 2015, he received the Congressional Gold Medal alongside All-American Fighter Aces. In 2022, his 100th birthday, he was recognized as the highest scoring living U.S. fighter ace and the only surviving American triple ace. That December, the Air Force Chief of Staff promoted him to Brigadier General Honorary at the Airspace Museum in California. He passed away peacefully May 17, 2024 at his home in Auburn, California, the town where he grew up, surrounded by family. He was 102 years old. On a personal note, just a few years ago, I was laying in bed at night, getting ready to go to sleep, when my phone rang and a number I did not recognize, but it said Auburn, California. I knew Colonel Anderson was from Auburn, California, and didn't know anyone else there. Normally, I don't answer numbers I don't recognize, but on this night, I had to answer it. I picked up the phone, said hello, and I got from the other line, "Hey, John, this is Bud Anderson. How are you doing?" We had a great conversation as I was working on a project. And again, it was just a humbling experience for me as I looked up to Colonel Anderson and all his peers as a fighter pilot. It's definitely a moment I cherish. And while somewhat simple, probably to most, to me, it was significant. Now, just a few days ago, Colonel Anderson received full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. Air Force Chief of Staff General Kenneth Wilsbach presented a flag to Anderson's son, Jim, who passed it to his sister, Kitty. They shared it. General Wilsbach's words: Bud Anderson is a hero and a legend in air combat. He wrote the playbook. He mastered his craft, flew with immense courage, and leaves a legacy of service that will inspire generations. General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, actually flew the flag that was presented during one of his proficiency flights in the F-16 just a few days prior. And we talked about the flyovers that occurred. The first pass was 4 F-35 Lightnings, America's frontline, most modern and advanced fighter. This aircraft exists because of what men like Bud Anderson built. The second pass, 4 P-51 Mustangs, 2 of them named Old Crow, obviously paying homage to Bud Anderson's start in the Air Force. I can't think of a better tribute to a fighter pilot who did so much for the Air Force. Bud Anderson was once asked about the worst thing about flying airplanes. He didn't hesitate. He said, losing friends. He was also asked about survival and how he came through 116 missions without a scratch, and so many others didn't. His answer, skill had something to do with it, I suppose, but there was certainly something more to it than skill. Lots of hot pilots never came home. I guess I was lucky or blessed. So rest easy, General, and blue skies.